Hello and welcome to another video. So today I wanted to take some time and talk about hammock camping. I've been hammock camping for the best part of the last about 6-7 years, and I think it's probably the best way to experience woodland camping. And there's a lot of advantages to it, and I think it's something that everyone should try at least once, just to see whether it's for them. So I hope over the course of this video to first of all convince you that hammock camping is worth a try and something that is well worth doing. And secondly, we'll talk a bit about the equipment that you'll need, and thirdly show you a bit of how to set up a hammock properly to get a good night's sleep. So if you have an interest in getting started camping, and hammock camping in particular, or you just want to come along for the ride and see what it's all about, then keep watching and I'll see you in a mo. So to start off with, the equipment that you will need for hammock camping is relatively simple and pretty much some of the same stuff that you would use for sessions or just being out in the woods anyway. So obviously, the thing you'll need that you may not have is a hammock. I believe DD Hammocks make some really good entry-level hammocks, so they're cheap enough but good enough quality that you can get something decent, see whether you like it, and then maybe move on to something else. But I've coped pretty well. This is a DD Frontline, so you'll see later on that it has a mosquito net attached, which is quite nice during the British summer because it does tend to get a little bit midgy or heavy with mosquitoes at times. So hammock, and there'll be straps that come with that, so attach them to the trees. Now, one of the things you'll need in addition to your regular sleeping bag is a hammock under blanket. This is sort of like a sleeping bag, except it'll fit underneath the hammock and it'll stop that cold breeze, those convection currents carrying all of the heat away from underneath you. This does make hammock camping slightly more bulky than going with just a tarp and a bivy bag, but there are advantages to having a hammock. So we've got hammock, under blanket, your regular sleeping bag. I don't tend to have a pillow when I hammock camp. If I'm camping on the ground, then I will do, but I find just with the lay of the hammock, I don't need them. But it's up to you. It might be worth just taking one along if you have a small camping pillow, or just roll up a down jacket or something like that. And then you will also need a tarp to go over the top. 3 meter by 3 meters is pretty good. So again, DD are a decent brand. I've got the DD Super Light here, but the regular 3x3 tarps would work just as well. So simple: hammock, under blanket, sleeping bag, tarp, and pillow is optional, and that's all you need in terms of sleep equipment to sleep. So essentially the tarp takes the place of your tent, so it is lighter in that way, but you will also need the addition of an under blanket. When it comes to finding somewhere to set up your hammock and tarp combo and get a good night's sleep, getting the right spacing of trees is really important. So you're going to be looking for 2 trees, but you need them a certain distance apart. With a tarp, you can usually get quite long guy lines, so you can manage longer distances. But if you're setting up a hammock, there's a upper level to how far apart the trees can be. And this does depend a bit on the straps that you have included with the hammock. So it's well worth getting them out, straps and all, and just seeing what the rough length is and getting a distance for that. So I know roughly for me that it's about 10 paces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is about right for me to set up my particular straps. So you want to pace out the distance, get two trees that are a nice distance apart. Too close together is a real problem. So if it's under 3 meters apart with 3x3 tarp and with a hammock, you're going to struggle because you're going to need to compact everything. So that's going to be tricky. So I'd recommend at least 3.5 meters, 4 meters as a good distance for most hammock setups. So you're looking for those two trees that are strong enough to hold you. So you want to have at least bigger than you can fit your fingers around at a bare minimum. Usually a good size, probably about 30 centimeters across, 20 to 30, that would be plenty. And you're looking for, as I said, those two trees, and then you want a little bit of space between the trees, those two trees and the other trees around them, because you're going to need to pop the sides of the tarp out. So this tree here is going to be maybe a little bit awkward, but I think if we go straight down at the back here, it'll work out just fine. Having other trees in kind of a box formation so you can get those diagonal pulls out of the tarp line is also nice to have, but you can go down to the ground. The most important thing is those trees 3.5 to 4 meters apart. And of course, whenever you're camping in the woodland or whenever you're running any sessions or you're likely to be in a place for a longer period of time, particularly if you are camping overnight, thing to do is to have a look up for dead branches, twigs without leaves, branches without leaves, and so on. Just have a look, see whether these things are going to come crashing down on you in the night. But that's the main thing. We don't have to worry as much about water, we don't have to worry about as much terrain, which is one of the big advantages of hammock camping. Is this slope here would be uncomfortable in a tent because you'd be sliding out of one end of it the entire night, but in a hammock it is perfectly good and usable. So first things first, we're going to get our tarp up, ridge line across there, and I'll just get straight on it. Depending on the type of hammock you have, you might have different straps on here. The basic DD strap would just be 2 black ropes that come out of the end of the hammock, and those will just go around the tree, cross over at the back, bring them to the front, and then tie a double shoelace knot right there. That's what DD themselves recommend, and I've found it's perfectly adequate for holding it on there. I've added some Thermarest straps to this, just so it gives you a bit more adjustability. It means, and I've separated the straps from the hammock, so that means I can set up the straps first and then come and clip in the hammock. So I'm not worried about the hammock dragging on the ground, getting wet, getting caught up in the brambles, and so on. So what you want to do with whichever strap you have is adjust them to the point where, if you pull it tight, the strap sits underneath the tarp itself, just underneath. So that means that the end of the hammock will be underneath the tarp. So you're going to do that on both sides. The other thing worth mentioning is the height that you want the hammock at. So this is a little bit trickier to judge, but I've gone for about shoulder height, which gets you a decent height, so you get a little bit of a shallow bend to the hammock all the way through. But we'll talk a bit more about straps and angles at the moment. But you want to get it nice and high up the tree. Okay, now the time that we put the hammock up. If you've got the straps permanently attached, then this is kind of combined with the last step. But for me, as I mentioned before, I just put a bit of cord through the end of my hammock like that and attached a climbing strength carabiner to it, and that means that I can clip it directly in on my line here. And as I say, I can keep it underneath my arm. It's not getting wet, it's not dropping on the floor. And if I pick up the other end here, I can just clip it in like that. As you can see, this hammock is pretty close to the ground right now. Ideally, we're going to want to bring it up. So there's a couple of factors we're looking at when we're getting a good hang for a hammock. First of them is going to be the height of the hammock above the ground. Ideally, you want enough height that you can comfortably sit in it with your feet on the ground. That's kind of the minimum. You can go higher depending on the grasses or brambles or whatever, or the material you have underneath your hammock. The other factor is you want the height to be high enough so that you're going to be protected by the sides of the tarp to a certain degree. So this will affect, obviously, this will be affected obviously by the weather. If it's quite windy and wet and you've got a lot of wind traveling sideways underneath, then you're going to want to be a little bit higher or have the tarp a little bit lower. Then the other thing we're looking at is the hang angle. So the shape that makes coming down here. You don't want a steep, really kind of U shape, as that is going to be really uncomfortable to sleep in. And really you don't want to be perfectly flat and straight either, so it's taut, so there's no tension at all. Ideally you want something in between. So I'm just going to tension this end down. First of all, I'm just going to raise the entire hammock up a little bit. You want both sides to be equal in height, otherwise you will be sliding down one end or the other. A good rule of thumb that a lot of hammock campers talk about is if you put your fingers into a pistol shape with the pointer finger parallel to the ground, you should get should be close to that 45-degree angle there. So I can go a little bit tighter here. And that way when I pull down there, I'll be at about where I want to be. So this is, for me, comfortable. You might need to have a bit of a play around with tension. Some people like a little bit tighter, some people like a little bit looser. But I think this is a good starting point in my experience. You've got the hammock hang angle about where you want it. And I've just clipped my mosquito net up onto the ridge line just to keep it out of the way. You can add your under blanket. There's a couple of different designs, but they usually have some clips on the end, and these will just go up onto your line there. Now it's usually a good idea, if you have continuous straps, to have something to act as a drip point right just before you join to your hammock, so that the water doesn't have the ability to run down the tree, run down your rope and keep going all the way into the hammock. So tying a piece of cord really tightly around here, having a carabiner to separate them, all generally very good ideas. So we just go underneath, so let's go hang, like that, and then there's usually clips or something that'll just clip onto the side. Once you've got it clipped in at either end and you have fastened it around the outside, you want it hanging, basically cradling around the underside of the hammock. So when you're sitting in it, you have that kind of sleeping bag covering the bottom edge of the hammock. This will create a warm pocket of air, so when you get those winds coming underneath the hammock, it won't directly steal the warmth from your bones. And that is pretty much the hammock setup. You can then put your sleeping bag in here and be quite comfortable. So the main advantages, I've talked about a few already, of having this kind of hammock setup. First of all is that you are up off the ground. So that means that you won't likely have slugs crawling over your face in the middle of the night, or be liable to the conditions of the ground. So the ground underneath here is relatively rocky, it's steep, it's covered in brambles, so that's not ideal for pitching a tent on. And that's the same for a lot of woodlands. A lot of really nice woodlands just have too much of a slope to be comfortable tent camping conditions. Which is where a hammock really shines. It can also be a little bit more compact than carrying a larger tent. It gives you quite a bit of living space. So if you have a tarp over the top, you've got plenty of space to stand up and move around. But by far the best part of hammock camping is the immersion. So rather than being inside a tent where you are walled off from the nature outside, if you're sleeping underneath a tarp, this is the kind of view you can wake up to in the morning. First, as soon as you open your eyes, you are there in the wilderness. You can see the deer moving through camp. You can see the buzzards sitting in the tree branches. You can see the birds starting to sing. You can see the morning sunlight starting to drift through the trees. It is honestly amazing to wake up, wrapped up in your sleeping bag, and just be able to see the woodland outside of the tarp. Well, I hope this has inspired you a little bit to give hammock camping a go. Like I say, it's something I've been doing for a long time, and if bulk really isn't too much of an issue, if I'm not going to be carrying my bags for miles, then the added weight of having an under blanket and the ability to get up off the ground makes more sense. So if I'm going out for a weekend camping for a conference or for something else, or just going out with the families I work with, I'm starting to run more overnight events, this is a really nice setup to have. And it's something that can also, I also lent out a whole bunch of my hammocks to a group during my last family camp event, and they had a whole lot of fun sleeping out overnight. They did it without the under blankets though, and they were getting a little bit cold, so make sure you have a good under blanket as well. If you have any questions about any particular aspect of the type of the equipment, of the hammock equipment, then do let me know. I can always make some follow-up videos or talk about it in a bit more detail over email or in the comments below. And if you would like to give hammock camping a try, this spot right here in Wellness Woodlands is available for hire. So if you do want to stop by and try out your hammock in a beautiful little woodland, so you're on a slope, the steam train runs just down there, at least not during the hours of the night. You've got acres of woodland and grassland out that way. It's a beautiful spot just over by Highley, and as I said, you can set up a hammock right here if you choose, which I think is a really, really nice spot. So thank you so much for watching and listening. If you want to set up tarps super fast like this, do check out my Essential Tarps and Knots course. There's a link to that in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to make the most of every day. I'll see you all in the next video.